past the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Greetings and welcome back as always. What ceasefire in Rwanda? Rwanda-backed rebels have killed hundreds in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The UN Rights Office said it had received firsthand accounts indicating that at least 319 civilians were killed by M23 fighters aided by members of the Rwanda Defense Force between the 9th and the 21st of July in North Kivu province. Most of the victims, including at least 48 women and 19 children, and were local farmers camping in their fields during the planting season. So, who are the M23 fighters? The BBC reports, to put it bluntly, a group of UN experts maintains the Rwandan army is, quote, in de facto control of M23 operations, end quote, detailing how M23 recruits are trained under Rwandan supervision and supported by high-tech Rwandan weaponry. Who's the president of Rwanda? Paul Kagame. Politico reports the thing to know about Kagame is not that he's a dictator responsible for human rights abuses, but that despite this, he has a great many friends. And who are those friends? The United States and other Western countries that are more interested in the mineral-rich East Africa and their proceeds. Is the U.S. playing both sides against the middle here? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
To the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and a broader historic context in which these events occur. And let's quickly look at some of today's headlines. Financial Times reports Germany suspends arms exports to Israel to, quote, rupture, end quote, in supposed rupture over Gaza. Germany has suspended arms deliveries to Israel for planning a fresh offensive in Gaza, which is heralded as a historic break from its unwavering post-war solidarity with the nation. But they, being Germany, will still provide weapons used to fight Iran, which begs the question, why are there always caveats to action allegedly being taken against the settler colonial state? Justice Department subpoenas Letitia James about Trump fraud probe. A second subpoena suggests that the agency is looking into James's high-profile litigation against the NRA. So what we have here is the Trump administration is now investigating the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, for her investigations and her civil charges against Trump and the success of that case, and her looking into the National Rifle Association. And polls find 69% of Ukrainians want a negotiated end to the war as soon as possible. Just 24% of Ukrainians want to keep fighting, which is a near complete reversal of public opinion since 2022. On today's episode, The issue before us is the eastern regions of the Democratic Republic of the Congo have been for decades in a state of internecine conflict that has often peaked in open war. Why? Let's talk to my guest and find out. She's the author of Prejudential, Black America and the Presidents, and she's the editor at Black Agenda Report, Margaret Kimberley. As always, Margaret, welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back with you.
So there's a piece by the University of Navarra in Spain entitled "Who Profits from Conflict in the Democratic Republic of the Congo?" And the subtitle is, "The war is not a failure of diplomacy or peacekeeping. It is rather the success of an international system that rewards instability when it advances strategic and economic interests." Margaret, what I think we see here is another example of the U.S. and its Western allies fomenting chaos between countries on the continent in a matter of controlled mayhem. Margaret, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's quite awful. What's great to be back, first of all, but it's terrible what has been going on for years with Rwanda. Rwanda borders eastern Congo and has occupied hundreds of miles of that country. That's where most of Congo's mineral riches are. And we're talking about every mineral: diamond, gold, cobalt, coltan, everything that we need to use our electronic devices, as we're doing right now. And Rwanda, and to a lesser extent, Uganda also, have been pillaging from that portion of Congo. And they make sure that these minerals that are needed so much make their way to the West, to the US, to European countries. So Kagame, Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, it's rare to be able to look at someone and declare that they're the absolute villain. But I think that's true in Kagame's case. He rules as an absolute dictator. Anyone who questions his regime, any opposition, people are imprisoned, disappear, die. He's even been accused of going beyond Rwanda's border to silence critics. And Congo, this poor country, I mean, poor, not literally, has a very weak government. And it doesn't even have a good military. So Rwanda freely goes in and out of Congolese territory. The Congo was hiring European mercenaries, Russians and others, paying them thousands of dollars, but not paying their own soldiers very much. It's quite a terrible situation. And we haven't gotten to this alleged peace agreement that was signed in Washington, which of course is phony. All the peace agreement did was establish that Rwanda is occupying eastern Congo. It didn't require them to leave. Allegedly, M23 is Rwanda.
Correct.
Militia controlled by the Rwandans. And it's a horrible humanitarian crisis, and it's fueled by greed of the West and the leader of Rwanda, who is an absolute dictator who works hand in hand with Western countries. He even, Rwanda agreed to take first asylum seekers from the UK. They had this deal when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister of the UK that Rwanda would take in asylum seekers. Fortunately, British law prevented that from ever happening, but not before the UK paid millions of dollars to Rwanda, which I actually think is kind of funny. And now with Trump is taking in these third country deportees. So it's a very long history of loyalty to the West and oppression of people in Rwanda and in Congo.
It's also, I think, important to understand, and the reason that I said in the open that the United States is playing both sides against the middle is because the United States provides aid to the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they provide support to Rwanda. So when you look at M23 and you say that M23 is backed by Rwanda, then you ask yourself, as I did in the open, who's the president of Rwanda? Paul Kagame. And Paul Kagame is a I don't necessarily know if we deem him a puppet, but he's definitely, well, go ahead.
Well, he's a player. I think he's more than a puppet because he has been, most puppets are just, I think of that word as meaning people who are just directly controlled and do what they're told. He has found a way to make the West happy, to give them access to all these minerals they want. But he also does what he wants to do. So there are UN resolutions. There are all kinds of orders and directives for M23 to leave Congo, and he just ignores it and does what he wants because he gives the West what they want. So their words of criticism and all their directives don't really mean much.
And I think it's also very important because folks listening to this conversation as we're here in 2025 and the president of the United States is Donald Trump, we could fall into the mindset of this is Donald Trump. But no, this goes all the way back to Bill Clinton.
Yes, it does.
And so this is, once again, this is not administration policy. This is American foreign policy.
Yes, foreign policy. And as you say, that goes back more than 30 years. So that's something that's bipartisan, isn't it? That U.S. presidents want to make sure that the U.S. has access to critical minerals. So Democrats, Republicans, it may as well be the same administration. I guess you could argue in many ways it is, especially in foreign policy, that the U.S. colludes with Kagame to take these actions to attack Congo, to occupy its territory. It's quite a shameful thing. And I think it's important. I always believe it's important to point out when Trump is not exceptionally bad. And this is one, this is one of those cases.
So how do we contextualize this relative to the alliance, the rise of the power of the Alliance of Sahel states in the Sahel region versus what's happening in East Africa and the possible influence that someone like Traore could wind up having in that space?
Well, it's so funny. It's like a night and day difference, isn't it? In the Alliance of Sahel states and Burkina Faso and Mali and Niger, they are working together to make their countries independent of the West, kicking out, they were all formerly French colonies, kicking the French out, saying that their resources, you can't just extract, that you have to, if you want our uranium, Niger has France uses a lot of nuclear power, and all the uranium comes from Niger.
Yes.
And they have said, the Nigerians have said, you can't just extract uranium, you have to process it here. Burkina Faso has gold. They've said the same thing. So we see the possibility of African countries, and those are the presidents of those three nations, a possibility of African nations being truly independent, not the term is flag independence or briefcase independence, where you're allegedly independent, but still very much dependent and under the control of foreign powers. So they are showing the world that African countries do not have to play this role of just being vassal states, and that they may be able to succeed in having true sovereignty, true self-determination for their countries, and that the Kagame example is one that is not inevitable for the continent.
And if you could please put up just that the Chirare picture with the three leaders, Gota and thank you, because I think it's always important to point out that all three of these men are wearing military uniforms. Mm-hmm. They came to power through coup d'etat. Mm-hmm. Not all coups are bad coups.
Yeah.
And this is I just wanted you to elaborate quickly on that point, because we've become conditioned. Oh, if you come to power through a coup, well, you came to power the wrong way. But in this instance, they are operating. They overthrew the bad coup. They are operating in the best interest of their countries, of their people. And they came to power the only way. They took power because they had to take power.
Yeah, coups are problematic. It's contradictory. The African Union has a policy opposing coups because we've had leaders who were trying to do right by their people who were overthrown in coups. So it doesn't always turn out in the interests of the people of these nations. So it's problematic. However, as you point out, in this case, we have three leaders who have stated that their mission is to make their country strong, to keep their countries independent of foreign influence, and to do right, develop the country in the interests of their people. So it is a contradictory thing. I suppose you could call them revolutions, actually, and not coups. Correct. Sometimes a coup is just trading, one guy who's the same as the other guy. But they are revolutionary in their outlook and in the way they want their countries run and to be seen in the world.
DJ, also known as Mr. Sandman, asks, who's more dangerous, Boko Haram in Nigeria or M23 in the Congo? Well, I'll let you respond.
Well, it's like that's an interesting question. I would say M23. Boko Haram is another force that destabilizes, and that is related to the U.S. overthrow of Gaddafi. That the arms that came from the military defeat in Libya have spread throughout the region to Mali, to Nigeria, and other countries. So that is a very direct tie to the actions of the U.S. and NATO in getting rid of Gaddafi, killing Gaddafi, and turning Libya into a terrible failed state. But it's all bad. All of it's bad. I would say M23 has created more damage to a sovereign state, and it's all happening in collusion with the West. So I would say M23, but I would not forget about Boko Haram and these other groups in that region of Africa.
And I would answer the question exactly the same way. I think what you have, whether you're talking about Boko Haram, whether you're talking about M23, you're talking about different uniforms that support the same interest and are funded by the same benefactors. Whether you're in Syria, whether you're talking about Al Qaeda in the Garab, pick one. They're variations on the same theme. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that you can say one is worse than the other. Willie Hicks says coups are mostly only bad when they're fomented by the West.
Well, you could say that. Sometimes coups happen for internal reasons, but I think the the important thing as we look at these countries is to say that people have to solve their own problems.
Mm-hmm.
And when the US or European nations involve themselves in African countries, they use this, responsibility to protect and humanitarian intervention. It's always BS, always.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we need to encourage and support those countries that are acting in the interest of their people. And even if it's something that we can't support, we have to say that the people in these countries have to figure this out for themselves. And intervention from the US and its allies is never the right move.
Let's move to that's a great point. Never the right move. There's a piece in Black Agenda Report entitled "Zionist Shakedown." It's a phenomenal piece. It opens Israel is a genocidaire apartheid state, silencing critics around the world through threats, intimidation, lawfare, and accusations of anti-Semitism to prevent facing justice through international law. Phenomenal piece. Oh, written by you, Margaret Kimberley. Isn't that something? And just quickly, you write, it's rare for the peoples of the world to be of one mind, to have unanimity of opinion on any subject. Yet we are seeing that phenomenon take place right now. There is very little disagreement over whether or not the United States-backed regime in Israel is committing war crimes and genocide. And you state Gallup data and Pew data to support that position, which, Margaret, to me, is incredibly telling, because who would have thought even 5 years ago that there would be the shift in narrative that has taken place since the genocide is now playing itself out before our very eyes?
Yeah, I was moved to write this. It was revealed last week. Everyone knows about this, speaking of shakedowns of Trump against major universities, requiring them to do away with any semblance of affirmative action, using his Zionist donors like Miriam Adelson, insisting, excuse me, that any criticism of Israel, the protests, the encampments can all be defined as anti-Semitic. And so these schools have been accused of being anti-Jewish, and they're being forced to do many things. In many cases, you can't enroll as a student unless you take a class on anti-Semitism, a class which is generally, excuse me, created by the ADL or some other Zionist group, which basically tells you to shut up about Israel. That's basically it. And in the case of Colombia, Trump took back federal money. Colombia agreed to pay the federal government $200 million over 3 years. And part of that agreement is to pay Jewish employees at Colombia $21 million, a pot of $21 million to any Jewish employee at Colombia who claims to have been a victim of anti-Semitism. And that's an obvious monetary shakedown. And there are other schools also who've had to pay Jewish employees this money. These are, and it has to, I certainly hope somebody is suing about this. These are EEOC agreements. They don't work like any other EEOC agreement I've ever heard of. It's going to be secret who gets money. It isn't clear how one goes about getting it, but it's a payoff. It's a payoff to Zionists. And the reason I pointed out the unpopularity of Israel is to say repression is their only out. The only way to continue U.S. support of Israel is to punish people who speak up and make people afraid of being public in their opposition to U.S. Support for genocide. And this is international. I give examples of other countries. In the UK, a group called Palestine Action has now been declared a terrorist organization. Excuse me, under the Terrorism Act of 2000. Palestine action has been proscribed is the term. Anyone who expresses, excuse me, any public support for Palestine action can be criminally charged. Now, that's the worst case scenario. We see in Australia, a journalist, a woman who was an anchor woman on Australian TV. She posted something about the late Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, and a Zionist group in Australia has accused her of racism. There is, and I suppose there should be, a law against discrimination and racism, but she has been charged under the laws of Australia. Journalist in Canada, Eve Engler, has been arrested once, has been threatened with arrest again. In the UK, Richard Medhurst, another journalist, is accused of supporting a proscribed group, but they won't tell him which group. They won't tell him what he said. They keep putting off his case because the case is nonsense. Ali Abumina of Electronic Intifada, was arrested in Switzerland. So this is happening, Zionist groups all over the world. And we have groups like Canary Mission, anybody, and they brag about getting people fired from their jobs, brag about getting kids kicked out of school, brag about their role in getting people like Mahmoud Khalil arrested. So I called it Zionist shakedown because that's what it is. It's using this scorched earth policy, this brute force policy to shut people up about Israel, because for the first time in U.S. history, most Americans have a negative view of that country. And all over the world, Israel is hated. Israeli tourists can't go anywhere in the world. Some of them lie about being Israeli. Some of them are harassed. And there is the only way to continue this support among Western nations is to make sure that people shut up. And that's why this is going on.
And in listening to you, it just reminded me of Norman Finkelstein's book, The Holocaust Industry, Reflections on the Exploitation of Jewish Suffering. This was I think the book that really put Norman on the map. Norman Finkelstein's The Holocaust Industry. And, to your point, I think it's also important for people to understand you've got philosophy professor Jason Stanley, who this summer left Yale University and has gone to a university in Canada, saying that he can't sit idly by and teach at an institution such as Yale that's going to fold under the pressure, this so-called anti-Semitic pressure. And one of the interesting points that he made is the position that's being advocated as anti-Semitic is actually anti-Jewish in and of itself. Because when you are using the suffering of Jews in a manner to terrorize other people under false pretenses, that it's in and of itself is anti-Semitic.
It is, unless you're powerful and you can punish people, then you can change what is anti? The word has no meaning anymore. What is anti? I mean, now it means criticizing Israel.
Right.
And we have, we've had these anti-BDS laws, Zionist groups demanding that states withhold funding from any individual or group who advocates for boycott, divestment, and sanction of Israel. Now we have, for example, in New Jersey, the state legislature is probably going to pass a law making it official that the IHRA, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, I think, definition of anti-Semitism, which includes saying that Israel is a racist state, and yes, it is, but making that official policy in the state of New Jersey. So this can go on and on. So, I mean, I sort of have a grudging respect for people who have that much nerve to say, if you criticize us at all, you're anti-Semitic, but we can brag about kicking people out of office, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman. We can brag about getting people fired. We can brag about having people detained about immigration. But if you point out the thing we brag about, then that proves you're the bigot. I mean, it's pretty incredible, but I believed it's important for the rest of us to point this out, this hypocrisy and this, it's a form of dictatorship. I don't know of any other group of people who have a connection with government and can demand that certain people be arrested. Now, most of these cases, Mahmoud Khalil is free. The young woman at Tufts, I'm forgetting her name. Ozturk was her last name. Now I remember. Yes. She has been freed. But the fact that this could happen at all, that they're saying these people are a threat to the United States. No, they just expressed opinions that the United States doesn't like, and they're not citizens. So there's this attempt to get them deported. And they bragged about trying to get people deported. So I am not saying anything that's inaccurate.
And when one understands the true definition of Semite, that's a language group.
Yes.
It is a linguistic group of people. Arabs are Semitic people. Palestinians are Semitic people. It's not based upon your religion. And folks, Judaism is not an ethnicity. It is a religion. And by the by, most of the people like Benjamin Netanyahu are European. They are not Arab. They are not. In fact, Benjamin Netanyahu's family name is Milikowski, because his grandfather immigrated from Poland in the 1920s.
Well, let me just say this. Golda Meir's name was Meyerson. David Ben-Gurion's name, I believe, was Greenstein.
That's correct.
Netanyahu is Milkowski. Jewish people in Israel, they're people have looked into this.
Right.
They have also European heritage. And the original Semitic people of the region are the Palestinians, in fact. So, what a nice little, arrangement they have there.
Excuse us, please, people, for confusing you with the facts. I'm sorry. That's just kind of how we operate. But anyway, okay. So, another piece that I think is important here, Black Alliance for Peace, and you can also find this at Black Agenda Report, condemns the Zionist brutalization and detainment of Chris Smalls, emblematic of the white supremacy at the core of Zionism. The Black Alliance for Peace unequivocally denounces the brutal assault and abduction of Amazon Labor Union co-founder Chris Smalls, who was detained by the IDF. Though he is now released, the exceptionally heinous treatment of him by the Zionist state forces demonstrates the historic neurotic fear of any interconnection between Black and African resistance to white supremacy. Margaret.
Yes, Chris Smalls is, you may know him. He is the first and I believe still only person to successfully organize an Amazon warehouse and unionize an Amazon warehouse. That's here in New York, in Staten Island, in fact. And he was invited to be a part of Freedom Flotilla, an effort to bring supplies into Gaza. The ship was called the Handala. He and other activists from a variety of countries. And like every other Freedom Flotilla attempt, they were boarded by the Israelis in international waters, I might add, not even in Israeli waters, in international waters, all arrested, all taken to Israel, all ultimately freed. He was freed and has been back in the U.S. for about a week, I think. But there were reports that he was singled out for a certain punishment. That he was physically assaulted, unlike others. He's the only. What a coincidence! The only Black person in the group. But
successful union leader.
Yes, an important person.
Mm-hmm.
Black Alliance for Peace and others have condemned not only his detention, but they point out that white supremacy is behind the treatment of the Palestinian people, the acceptance of the treatment of Palestinian people, that governments all over the world, the US, Europe, Canada, Australia, can all defend people being starved, as you pointed out in your great article. Being deliberately starved, hospitals being bombed, all manner of atrocities, sexual assaults of men and women, homes being destroyed. I mean, I could go on, and it's all on camera. I mean, there's never been a genocide that was as well documented as this one. But it's white supremacy that allows it to go on. White supremacy, imperialism, in the case of Germany, fear. Germans need to stop being afraid of Jews. They just need to stop. They are so guilt whipped. All they learned about, I was always told the Germans, take very seriously being anti-fascist. Well, this is fascism, what the German government is doing now. And they are afraid of Jews, and they need to stop. And the people of that country need to oppose what their government does in supporting Israel, as people all over the world. I mean, huge demonstrations. I'm not exaggerating to say that millions of people have taken to the streets all over the world since October of 2023 to protest Israel's occupation, to protest this mass slaughter, to protest this starvation, to protest the collusion of the corporate media. The New York Times backtracked. They had a photograph of a starving child, and the Israelis said, well, the child already had a muscle disease or something. He had a pre-existing, as like what are you now, an insurance company? Right. A pre-existing condition. I would like to know what condition mimics starvation, but the Times, being a pro-Zionist paper, backtracked not 24 hours later. And what did they get for their trouble? Netanyahu says, well, we should sue the New York Times. I'm looking in to see if a country can sue a newspaper, and it serves them right. They have been hiding the genocide. They first with the Biden administration, now with the Trump administration. They have repeated all the Israeli talking points. Hamas is sometimes it's Hamas is stealing food. Right. Then other times it's, well, nobody's hungry at all. I'm like, well, which is it? Now, there is food being stolen. There is an Israeli-backed gang that steals food. There are also Israeli settlers who literally stand in front of trucks to prevent and bring their kids with them. And yes, you can see this online very easily, to prevent trucks from getting in. Israel is preventing aid from getting in. There's no mystery about why people are going hungry. And part of the reason is white supremacy, which explains why Chris Smalls was singled out, and explains how this is accepted by so many people.
And there's another element to this that has really now, because of the heinousness of the genocide, there's another, of the starvation. There's another element of this, and that is the highest number of amputees are in Gaza. And they're under the age of about 22. You've got Israeli snipers that have been intentionally shooting children and maiming children. And the other element of this I think is important for people to never forget is the generational impact that this starvation is going to have on children, I'll say between the ages of 1 year old and 10 years old, because many of the impacts of starvation are once you get to the tipping point are irreversible.
Yep.
So you're talking about the physical development. You're talking about the arrested, I guess, physical development, mental development. There are a number of factors here, a number of impacts that are never going to be able to be overcome. And a lot of people think, well, if we just give them food, they'll be fine. In many instances now, giving them food will kill them.
Well, it's not, I don't understand completely this medical information, but it's common sense. You're talking about children whose growth is stunted, who physically, mentally will never be normal.
Correct.
And even if you give them food now, the damage has been done. And we have babies who don't survive infancy, mothers who haven't been able to give birth safely, who don't have food, who don't have enough to breastfeed, where they're withholding baby formula. So even if the mother can't breastfeed, the children are dying. The fact that Israel is deliberately shooting kids, deliberately murdering journalists and their whole families, deliberately destroying hospitals, homes, schools. I mean, when I think about it, I don't know of any situation where there's so many different atrocities being committed at the same time. And I point out to people the word genocide. And yes, Bernie Sanders, it is true that genocide is a legal definition, but this fits the legal definition, which was codified by the United Nations, 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. I think that's right. Israel is a signatory, and genocide is spelled out in general as deliberate harm, inflicting deliberate harm on a group of people. It can be physical harm, it can be mental harm, it can be killing people. Israel's doing all of those things. And another thing, sometimes they're saying people aren't hungry, and then they say, well, they need to release the hostages, and so it's okay to withhold food. That is a confession to a war crime. That is collective punishment, punishing one person or group for something done by someone else. It is a war crime by definition, according to the Geneva Conventions. So we have all this evidence, but we have powerful people who stand in the way, who have friends all over the world, who stand in the way of justice. So the United Nations or the International Criminal Court are hamstrung by the United States. It took them forever to issue an arrest warrant of Netanyahu, and it's been ignored by the United States. He's flown to the United States more than once since this arrest warrant was issued. He has to fly over Europe. Have any European country said we're going to arrest him? No. Their latest BS is about we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. That ship sailed. That's meaningless. It is an attempt for those who have been a party to this genocide to try to look good at the last minute. Nobody in Gaza is asking for Palestine to be recognized. It is nonsense, and I certainly hope people don't fall for that.
And when you listen to that gibberish from Macron in France and von der Leyen in the EU and Spain and a few others, they interestingly say we're running this through Abbas, which means you're running it through nobody because he's a big fat nobody.
Yes,
that guy,
the head of the Palestinian Authority.
Right.
Talk about a puppet. I mean, he is the definition of a puppet, which
exactly.
So that's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. He's considered a traitor. He's hated by Palestinians. And so it's a late attempt at an out for continuing to commit these crimes.
And now the development is that Netanyahu and let me just mention Smotrich going into the Alaska compound with the settlers, just utter insanity. But now Netanyahu says we're going full bore into Gaza. Hostages be damned.
Well, they were already damning the hostages. All this talk about the hostages was phony. They're just a bargaining chip for Netanyahu. He doesn't care if the hostages die. He doesn't. They've turned down offers to have all the hostages released. They hope to kill as many people as possible so they can fully occupy Gaza, although they're already occupying. I'm not sure what that will mean. They're trying to force Egypt and Jordan to take these 2 million people, to take them in. Neither country wants to do it for political reasons. Both Jordan and Egypt are U.S. client states. And if they take in these people, it will be clearer than ever to their people that their governments are puppet states of the U.S. and are subservient to Israel. The last thing they want is to have 1 million people living proof of their treachery. So they don't want, and they shouldn't do it. Why should people have to leave their homes? But that's Israel's goal, to kill as many people, to make the survivors as miserable as possible, to force people out so that they can occupy the Gaza Strip.
And folks need to understand that this is being done with American tax dollars. When Netanyahu said we're going to go in now and take over the Gaza Strip, Donald Trump's response was basically, do what you have to do.
Oh, absolutely. Trump's a true believer. They hit the jackpot with him, but they were hitting the jackpot with Biden. Let's remind people the role that Antony Blinken played when the South Africa formally brought charges against Israel to the International Court of Justice. The day that their judgment came down, Blinken said that the UNRWA, UNRWA relief agency, had been infiltrated by Hamas, and nobody should give money to UNRWA because it was Hamas. The U.S. cut off money. European countries cut off money. That was the beginning of the starvation plan. It started with Blinken and it started with Biden. So Trump he's continuing what had already begun. This is settled policy in Washington.
And it is definitely settled policy. As we just talked about a little earlier when we were talking about what's going on in Rwanda, it's not administration policy, it's American foreign policy. And Carol Asbaram, which Arab country is providing weapons to kill people in the Sudan? I think the answer to that is the United Arab Emirates.
Yes.
Is the country. And thank you, Carol, for that super sticker. And Carol, I'm not sure when you came into the conversation, but we started off by talking about Rwanda. We drew some comparisons to what's been going on with the Alliance of Sahel states. So we started the conversation, Carol, today talking about countries in the continent and what's going on there. Final point, and again, this is another piece from Black Agenda Report. Obama colluded with the surveillance state against Trump. It is true that Barack Obama used the surveillance state apparatus in an effort to undermine the first Donald Trump administration with the Russiagate fraud. Oh, written by? Who's this written by? This is Margaret Kimberley wrote this piece as well. Margaret, this is being dismissed by mainstream as just a big nothing burger. But we had Ray McGovern on when the story first broke. Ray was on trying to clarify, no, there is some there. Margaret Kimberley.
Oh, absolutely. So how does Russiagate begin? It begins in the 2016 campaign with Hillary Clinton, who should have spent her time trying in a get out the vote effort, but instead she decided to paint Trump as a Russian agent. And part of the reason was the story broke that the Clinton Foundation, quote unquote, a slush fund, had played a role in bringing uranium to Russia through a Canadian company. So there were all kinds of shenanigans. And it was good reporting in the New York Times, the last time they did any good reporting. But anyway.
And I think that Canadian company might have been, if not owned, her brother, Hillary's brother, was involved with that mining company.
So, yes, and they're all, as I said, all kinds of dirty dealing.
Right.
So after this story broke, her pollsters told her that this is something people would not like. Imagine that. So she decides to paint Trump as, Putin's puppet, and if he wins, it'll be Christmas in the Kremlin and all of that. People ignored her. She spent all her time on all manner of skullduggery instead of getting out the vote in swing states and missing out. Can you imagine raising $1 billion and you can't get 78,000 more votes in the right states? But anyway, that's Hillary Clinton. So Trump wins. In December, I believe it was in December of 2016, after the election, Michael Flynn, who had been director of intelligence for the Pentagon, I believe, under Obama, is now working with Trump's campaign, and he meets with Russia's ambassador. Why did he meet with Russia's ambassador? Because Israel asked him to, trying to get a promise of a veto for an upcoming UN resolution condemning Israel. The conversation is recorded. He talks to the Russian ambassador a couple more times. He basically tells the Russians to chill out. Don't attack the U.S. right now. We're going to have better relations when Trump is inaugurated. So the conversations are recorded. The FBI, James Comey, knows about it. They decide to get Flynn. Trump comes in. Flynn is, was he National Security Advisor? He had some.
Sounds right.
And they trick Flynn into talking to the FBI. Comey went to such great lengths. He leaked the story to the Washington Post saying, Flynn is not the target of an investigation. Flynn lets his guard down. He talks to the FBI. By the way, never talk to the FBI without your lawyer present, or any other cops for that matter. But Flynn makes that rookie mistake. He's accused of lying to the FBI, and he has to resign. This is the beginning of the Mueller investigation. So this all began with Obama. They had a meeting in the White House first week of January 2017. Biden was there, Obama, Comey, Susan Rice. I can't remember who else was present. And they hatched this plan to get Trump, to tie him with Russia and to undermine his investigation. So it pains me to say these words, but Trump is telling the truth about Obama's role in promoting Russiagate.
And listening to Ray McGovern and the hacking story, it's important for people to understand that there is a definition of hacking, and that is using the internet to access a data source. The DNC server was not hacked.
Nope.
Someone went into the room where the server is located and plugged a thumb drive. I'm trying to find one.
We all know what that is, a flash drive.
A flash drive into the USB port and copied the data from the server. And that to me is an important point because they were trying to blame Russia for hacking the server, but Ray McGovern and Bill Binney from the NSA proved it defies the laws of physics. It's impossible to download the amount of data that was downloaded in the amount of time that it was downloaded over the internet. Can't do it. So I always want to make that point when this story comes up, because I think it's very, very important for people to understand the Russiagate story for a number of reasons was just flat out wrong.
Oh, it was. It absolutely was a lie. Someone leaked the DNC files to WikiLeaks. It wasn't Julian Assange. It was someone in the inside. We don't know who killed Seth Rich, but I'm just going to say it. I find it fishy that this person, this young man, was murdered at the time these events took place. But there was a leak. There was no hack. We were told this for months and months and months, a hack. And then it was like, actually, no. And then CloudStrike says, well, actually, no. When they were under oath and couldn't lie about it anymore, they admitted the same thing.
Let me give you a possible explanation as to why. Because there was somebody in the DNC that respected Bernie Sanders, didn't like what Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Hillary did to Bernie Sanders, and decided, I'm going to show you. And went in with a thumb drive and sent that stuff to WikiLeaks. How about that as a rationale?
Oh, they were rigging it against Bernie Sanders. And again, you know, Hillary Clinton, I can't believe anybody still respects her or wants to mention her name or anything. She screwed up a race. First of all, even with she probably could have beaten Bernie Sanders. But being who she is, a crooked person, rather than just make the case for herself, but she didn't really she's a horrible politician. She didn't know the first thing about how to make the case for herself against Bernie Sanders. Sanders is gaining on her. They rigged it against him. And someone at the DNC said, well, this is dirty pool or whatever you want to call it, and leaked that information. And the rest is history, as the saying goes.
As they say. Margaret Kimberley, as always, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your work. And greatly, greatly appreciate you joining us today. And as always, we look forward to having you back.
I look forward to coming back. Thank you, Wilmer.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. All right, folks. Well, again, I got to thank Margaret for joining me today. Thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episodes next week. I can't remember who I've got on Monday, but stay tuned. As the Moon Man would tell you, it's going to be a big one. Please follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show. Follow us on social media. All the links are below in the show description. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. Why? Because we're rhetoric free. See y'all next week. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.